John McMullen, who has the full story at 97.3ESPN.com. He joins me now. John, we thought football might have been in the back burner. You said it yesterday. They always seem to have something. This isn't what they wanted.
No, it isn't, and it's everything coaches in this league fear when they send their players off for that 6-week period. And you generally think you're going to last more than 2 hours. And obviously Nelson went directly to the strip club, which is less than a couple miles away, and that wasn't a very good decision. And it's too early to speculate, but the allegations are very, very serious, so we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out.
Yeah, John, what do we know here at this time? I know there's been the Eagles have acknowledged this, correct?
Yes, they have. They've acknowledged they're aware of the situation, that there is an investigation. Nelson has been accused of sexual assault by a dancer at the club, so that part is all confirmed at this stage. And now it's just a matter of whether a he said, she said situation and who's telling the truth, and we'll see how that part. And that's what I got a source in the Philadelphia Police Department who told me that particular strip club has extensive video surveillance. So it was supposed to have occurred in the club where there is video surveillance, so that should tell the tale in this entire case, and we'll see how that shakes out.
Any time frame on when some stuff could be coming forward here, or some video could be out? I know Police Commissioner Richard Ross told Philly Magazine that they are actively running on this investigation.
Yeah, well, you would imagine if they have that kind of evidence, and this is, again, a very, very serious allegation, it's going to go pretty quickly. And we'll see how it shakes out. Les Bowen, I know the Daily News is reporting, he's got a source with ties close to Nelson who claims that Nelson was set up. So it's one of these situations, and you see it in a lot of sexual assault cases, especially when they involve high-profile people. You have two sides. One tries to paint it as a setup, whether they're sort of shooting for money or something of that nature. And the other side obviously believes that you have a high-profile athlete trying to take advantage of his situation, and we'll see which side is telling the truth.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. You hate to say, what does this say about the players on the team? Doug Peterson just got done saying this is a smart team, and at 3 o'clock on a Thursday, this happens. It doesn't make you sound too smart, and it makes it, like you said, this is the biggest fear, is having these guys leave the complex and having time to themselves.
Yeah, it really is. I write the story every year. I write a column, and it's just coaches around this league are fearful. And it's easy to say it. We just saw it in Dallas with Aqib Talib, who allegedly shot himself in a strip club when he got intoxicated. At least that's what sources are telling me. And guys don't make good decisions. And part of it is being young. Part of it is having a lot of money. But you're less than 2 hours off the practice field, and you're running over to the closest strip club in South Philadelphia. I mean, yeah, you deserve to have some fun. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing illegal with it. But when you're an athlete and you're a celebrity, at least on a local kind of framework, you got to make better decisions. It's as simple as that. And it's not only Nelson, obviously, but two other teammates who I think I know. I'm not going to name, but because I don't have it confirmed yet. But it's just bad decisions to do that kind of thing, especially as you mentioned, after the head coach is bragging about you, talking about how smart the team is, and he's saying, enjoy your vacation, enjoy your family, and the first thing you do is head down the street to the strip club.
Well, what time did those guys, what time was practice over? Well, I mean, seriously, like you just said, here's your coach telling you, enjoy your family, go out. Now, Aguilar's, 23 years old? Maybe he's probably not married, probably no kids or anything, but here's the coach saying, go out, have a good time, enjoy your family, enjoy yourselves. And, an hour? What time did they leave NovaCare?
They broke practice early. It was just after 12. So and then they had an open locker room period. So as far as people started sort of trickling out, it was after 1 o'clock. So it was less than 2 hours later than they left the NovaCare complex, less than basically 2.5 hours after they were off the practice field. And, part of me says, look, hey, there's nothing wrong with it other than it looks bad if you don't do anything, obviously. And as the other two players who were with Nelson certainly aren't accused of anything, it's probably not the best decision in the world. But they're adults. They can do what they want. It's a legitimate business. There's nothing illegal about it. It's just disappointing from the team standpoint, because you try to teach them as much as you can and say you're in a different position than, say, you and I, if we did the same thing. No one's going to care. No one's going to bat an eye. But when you're a high-profile athlete in a city like Philadelphia, and it's not only because of maybe a fan will take a picture of you there. Maybe you do have a wife. Maybe you have a girlfriend. You're going to get in trouble that way. And people know who you are. So that part of it doesn't make sense. But it's also the fact that you're representing the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's bigger than you.
Yeah, and yeah, go ahead.
And I just think from that standpoint, obviously, it's disappointing even the teammates that were with Nelson from Doug Peterson's standpoint.
Yeah, and it ties into a couple articles you wrote at today's Pigskin, John, about, Johnny Manziel, who just constantly gets in trouble. And, it seems like these guys can't keep themselves out of trouble. You heard the Talib story that you wrote about. Here's a guy who shoots himself, allegedly. It's just a bizarre bunch of happenings with guys who I think it comes back to young guys with a lot of money.
Yeah, it does. It does, and it's real difficult. We all did some dumb things when we were younger, and everyone does. And Nelson doesn't have a history of getting into trouble, so this is not a guy like Johnny Manziel who's constantly doing something after something. And from the people who like and respect Nelson, the hope is that he is being set up and trying to be taken advantage of. If he's not, as I wrote at 973ESPN.com, this goes far deeper than football. He's in some serious trouble, and the Philadelphia Eagles are on the back burner if this is something that he did, because obviously he's gonna have some serious legal repercussions.
All right, John. To kind of go off that, I found an interesting story in the New York Post about Ruben Randall, who signed over here. He plays the same position. We talked about him yesterday. It sounds like, they're kind of counting on him to be a big contributor, and it sounded like he was disappointed that he was not brought back by the Giants.
Yeah, he was. I wrote about that at today's Pigskin also earlier this week. He kind of explained that he's a laid-back kind of guy, and he is. And he believes the Giants took his personality the wrong way, specifically Tom Coughlin. And we all know what Tom was as far as being a taskmaster, and sort of benched him 2 different times for being late to team meetings. There was always the narrative that he was a lazy player, and so many times he and Eli Manning weren't on the same page as far as interceptions. And inevitably, when that happened, let's be honest, Ruben got the blame because of Eli's reputation. I'm not sure that's fair, to be perfectly honest, because Eli, as much success as he's had, he is apt to turn the football over at times, and he does throw a lot of interceptions. And I think if you look at their history together, they had a lot of success, a lot of numbers, and they also had a lot of failings, and I think it was a lack of communication. That part Ruben kind of agreed with, and he's hoping for a clean start. And now, because of this situation, if anything, the Eagles are going to have to lean on him even more heavily. And they were expecting to do that even with Nelson Agholor in line.
Yeah, and you wonder now with Randall, who, he's 25 years old. You got Agholor, 23, Jordan Matt. They got a young core there. If they're going to kind of be forced now, John, once training camp comes around, to kind of wait for the waiver wire and try to find somebody here if there's some trouble to be had here down the road.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're always looking to improve your team. I don't think they're that bad off as far as depth goes, because I think you bring in a Chris Givens along with that. He's there. Josh Huff is still here, even though he had a number of problems in OTS, still dropping the football. Those are fine for fourth or fifth receivers. It's when you have to count on those guys to be number one or number twos that you get into trouble. So I think from a depth standpoint, the Eagles are fine, but I just don't think they have enough splash sort of playmakers at the top of the depth chart. And I think that remains a concern, whether Nelson is here or he's in trouble or not.
Right.
I just think it's a concern either way.
John, a lot of other stuff going on in the NFL, too. We talked a lot about the Eagles. Their OTAs finished up. They'll be done for about the next 5 or 6 weeks here before they come back for training camp. And we'll obviously keep our eye on this Nelson Agholor story as something happens here. Of course, we told you earlier, police, the Eagles confirmed the police inquiry of this Nelson Agholor story, so there is certainly something there, and we don't know how much further it will go, but there is something there to keep an eye on, so we will certainly be doing that. Some other things out there as we kind of jump into. You write about this at today's Pigskin, and I want to bring it up because he was a guy who played for the Eagles, and it's the story of Brandon Boykin, who, when he was an Eagle, he was a guy that a lot of fans, he was like the Darren Sproles of the defense. Why isn't this guy getting more time? Why won't they put him on the outside? They trade him last year for basically, just to get out of here. Pittsburgh never uses the guy. I mean, hardly ever uses this guy. They get rid of him. He goes to Carolina, never really steps on the field, and they cut him, and here he is. And now they're talking about this degenerative hip problem that he has, which he says is not true. What a bizarre story over the last year and a half for Brandon Boykin.
Yeah, it really is. And if you go back to the year, Chip Kelly's first year, when he had 6 interceptions, as you mentioned, 17, I think, passes defended, just very, very productive. And I think when you talk to Brandon after that season, he was always disappointed because the Eagles wouldn't give him an opportunity to move outside the slot. They just kind of saw him as a slot player. And I don't necessarily disagree with him because he just doesn't have the size to play outside the numbers. And Chip Kelly, as we all know, he's a measurables guy. He sort of looks at every position, and he wants a certain body type for that position. And for outside cornerback, it was always the Byron Maxwell types, who are big, long, lengthy guys. That's what he wanted, and Brandon didn't fit that. So it made a lot of sense when he moved here, but as you mentioned, when he went out to Pittsburgh, which was a very, very cornerback-needy team, and he didn't get on the field, you sort of started to raise an eyebrow. What's going on? And Carnell Lake, their defensive backs coach, kind of let the cat out of the bag a couple of weeks ago, and he said one leg is longer than the other. And because of that, he's got a degenerative hip condition. He can't run. And that's why he didn't get on the field with the Steelers. And that's why he's having trouble signing elsewhere. Brandon denies that, and obviously, but it's something that's out there in the NFL world. So there's not going to be a medical staff in this league that brings Brandon Boykin in. And he's had recent tryouts with Atlanta and Dallas, who's not going to look really, really closely and see what's going on. Because he's not a doctor, and if people do believe he has a degenerative hip condition, that kind of explains the fall of where he was when he was playing so well here in the slot.
Yeah, what a bizarre story. Is this something that, like, you said that they said he had one leg longer than the other. Was this something that just happened? I mean, he's saying it's not true. Was that something that happened when he was in Philadelphia, or did it happen once he left here? It sounds bizarre.
Yeah, it does sound bizarre. It's obviously when you say one leg longer than the other, it's not, not a 6'5" leg on the body, It would just be very, very slight that you can't see to the naked eye. So, but it can cause problems as far as your alignment goes, and as far as in this case, the hip, and the Steelers certainly believed it was degenerative. They think the Eagles knew it and kind of put one over on them and didn't tell them. So that's another layer to this story. So there's certainly people that believe it, and Brandon himself doesn't. He's been productive. When he did get on the field for the Steelers later in the season, he played pretty well in coverage. Wasn't very well, didn't do very well in run support, but that's never been his strength. So it's an interesting thing. But if you think about it, Mike, the rosters in this league are at 90 players for 32 teams right now, and Brandon Boykin doesn't have one of those jobs.
Bizarre. John McMullen at JF McMullen. Kumbaya is out in San Francisco. Colin Kaepernick now likes it out there.
Well, he's got to. He's got nowhere else to go. He overplayed his hand. I think the smart way to go. It's very difficult. I mean, it's easy to say somebody should take less money to go to a better situation because football players especially have a very short shelf life. And I rarely blame them for not renegotiating, taking lower salaries if they don't have to. And that's where Colin ended up. But I think if you look at the difference between the San Francisco 49ers, if you look at Vegas and the odds, they're one of the 2 or 3 worst teams in football. It's as simple as that. Whether he's playing, Blaine Gabbert's playing, they just don't have a lot of talent. And he had an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl champions. And if you take a little bit less money this year, and all of a sudden that's a 13-win team, well, you're going to get the big long-term lucrative extension. You would have made it up plus much, much more. Mm-hmm. But it's tough to sell that to players because you're talking, especially a guy, Colin's had 3 surgeries this offseason. He's not even a full go yet as far as being healthy. So these guys know how quickly it can be taken away from them. And it's tough to leave $5 million on the table, which is what the Broncos were basically asking them to do.
What, over the next week or so, John, covering the league for today's Pigskin on a national level, what are some of the things that you're looking at? Oh, I know there's some more OTAs for some other teams, and then after that, there's a break for the Eagles here. What are some of the things you are looking at in the NFL over the next couple of weeks?
Well, next week is actually the bigger week as far as mini camps. More teams have their mini camps next week, and I think that's part of the crux of that with the Eagles is they had a new coach, so you get to start and ramp things up earlier. And I think in some ways it helps because you get a little bit of extra work. In some ways, though, it has hurt the Eagles already because you can imagine if minicamp was set for next week, well, all of a sudden you only have 5 weeks to worry about. Now, who knows? Nelson might have still went straight to the strip club. The same thing might have happened. We can't speculate. But to have less time off and away from the facility, I think most coaches would prefer that this time of year. And that's basically what we do when we cover the NFL. We're just like the teams. We're waiting, unfortunately, for these knuckleheads to get in trouble, and all too often it happens.
All right. Of course, if NFL news happens, we'll have more from John at JF McMullen on Twitter. Check him out at Today's Pigskin and over at 973ESPN.com for all of your Eagles news and notes for the rest of this offseason leading up to Eagles training camp the last week of July. John, have a great weekend, man.
Hey, you too, Mike.